Hello, this is Tom, aka Genio here for Star Frontiers Gamer with Fanzine Friday. And we are doing, this is Fanzine Friday number 31. So that means we're doing issue number 6 of the Frontier Explorer. Now, normally I would, a little record keeping here, I would put in the show notes a link to the PDF download from the Frontier Explorer website, but there seems to be some problems with the Frontier Explorer website. So I'm actually going to do the link for drive-through. That just means, I mean, it's still free to download, but that just means there's an extra step. You'll have to go through the checkout process, then you download from the link. It's an extra step. It's no big deal. It's just that the Frontier Explorer website seems to be having problems. So record keeping out of the way, Frontier Explorer number 6 was one of our first themed issues where we actually conscientiously had a theme. We hadn't had too many of these up to this point. It is a Sathar theme. We have this picture from AZ Gamer, Scott Mulder, and it's a Sathar fleet departing a planet. It was kind of cool. The quote for this particular issue is "Danger wrapped in darkness." Now that is a quote. It's one of my favorite quotes from the J.J. Abrams Star Trek. Full quote is, "Space is diseased and danger wrapped in darkness and silence." Leonard McCoy, Star Trek 2009. Tom Stevens actually came up with that quote and on his own, and I thought it was a good one. I loved it for this particular issue. It really goes with the Sathar theme of danger wrapped in darkness. Well, let's get right into the articles. The first article is a player's guide to the Star Frontiersman setting, the Star Frontier setting. The player's guide articles were things that I were doing. I did one for each of the alien species in the core 4. You know, a player's guide to Dralosites, a player's guide for Yuzarians, a player's guide to the Vrusk. And this was the player's guide to the setting in general. So basically, it's 2 pages. When you print it, and with double-sided printing, it's 1 sheet. So it becomes a 1-sheet handout that you can just give. That was the concept here. You can just give this 1 sheet to a new player and get them up to speed on. So they're like, oh, I want to play Yuzarian, but I'm not sure if I know how. You can give them the Yuzarian handout, and it's easy to read over, and it gives you very concise information. This, however, is just concise information about the setting, get you up to speed. The Yuzarian Parajumper. This is an archetype. It's obviously leveraging the Yuzarian gliding ability. And so the character concepts were the Rescue Jumper, the Force Recon, and the Upper Story Thief. Now it's not often that you get character concepts within an archetype article that are vastly different. And these are all vastly different. So this is really a fascinating article. Like, for instance, the Force Recon, I had been watching a little documentary on, Recon Marines who insert, stay stealthy. You never know they're there. They do their mission, they get out. So that was cool. So I wrote part of when I was writing this Force Recon character concept. I had that documentary in mind. Upper Story Thief. This is a Yuzarian who might base jump from a building to glide to another roof that's lower because he's, the security is sometimes a little bit lighter on the roof than it is going through the front door. And the Rescue Jumper, of course, is, those people who jump out of helicopters to go rescue people. And so very cool concepts. We go through to the development, the equipment, the edges and flaws. These edges and flaws optional rule was in the digitally remastered Alpha Dawn rules produced by Bill Logan. Those have since been removed from the internet since 2018. They were once Wizards of the Coast started to sell the Star Frontiers reprints through One Bookshelf drive-through. those were forced to be removed because they were being offered for free, and you can't have them being offered for free and competing with the actual reprints of the Star Frontiers rules. They couldn't have them competing, so they were removed. And this edges and flaws system has, the rule itself is gone because it was in that particular product, which is gone from the internet, and the only way you would have access to it is if you downloaded it prior to 2018, or if you chatted somebody up who had downloaded it before 2018 and they shared it with you. So maybe, quite possibly, this might be something we want to dig up, maybe do a fresh presentation of it and get it back in publication somehow, some way, just this particular rule. I don't know if people like the edges and flaws. I kind of like them. So if it's something that you used, I'd love to hear about it, because there's a lot of edges and flaws out there that got written over time in various articles. They could all be collected. The rule could be dusted off and remastered, rewritten, and somehow put back into publication so that it's accessible. But that's only going to be worthwhile if people actually use it. If nobody uses it, it's But so these edges and flaws, they're obsolete unless you have access to that rule set that was deleted from the internet in 2018. Next up, we get a system brief and planetary brief for Truane's star system. This is written by Darren Moffat. It's I like it and I don't like it. There are things about it that I don't like. One of the things that I don't like about it is it didn't take into account canon, quasi-canon content that had been produced principally in two things that you might not necessarily consider canon. One was the Volturnus Connection article in Dragon magazine, which went into and talked, and it gave setting details, particularly about New Pale. And so I don't see that material reflected in here. And then there's also canon details that are revealed to us in the Endless Quest book, Captive Planet, because Captive Planet is set on New Pale. And so I don't see this material reflecting that. And I would want, if I'm going to use this, I kind of want it to reflect that. But I've read through this, and this is a really thorough system brief. I mean, he goes into a lot of detail. He covers a lot of things here. Goes into details about laws, about the other planets, about the military. So he's more thorough than average with the planetary brief for a fan proposed planetary brief. And for that reason, I like it. But again, my one criticism is I wish it had reflected, taken into account a lot of that other material that I know is out there that I kind of like to include. The next up is Sathar Summit 2. This was written by me, and this was a proposed, every so many years they would have this conference where all these experts on the Sathar, from universities, from naval intelligence, from space fleet, from ground fleet, from star law, from all of, it's a multidisciplinary thing. And so it's government and private sector, and all of these experts come together, and you almost probably have to have a security clearance to attend. But they come together and they discuss the most recent best information on the Sathar, the most recent research, and so on and so forth. And so that was the idea here. And so I just pulled together new information on the Sathar as we talked about them in the forums, and I pulled it all together and packaged it as an article. So I have a writing credit on it because I did the work of pulling it together and packaging it as an article, but many of the ideas in here are probably not even mine. And I couldn't even go, this one's mine, that one's so-and-so's, at this point, because we're talking years ago. But this is a great article. It explores some of the discussion we were having online about the Sathar caste system, having an upper caste, a lower caste, and a middle class. The upper class being the elites, and the middle class being the technicians, and the lower caste being the cannon fodder. They're not that bright. They're just cannon fodder. They're just given a gun charge. And so the lower caste is what you see in the Volturnus module, the third Volturnus module, when it's a Sathar with a laser gun and he's rushing into battle. He has no other equipment. And so they only make sense as a cannon fodder, and they're only cannon fodder because they're not that bright, and they're part of this lower caste. And we explain the reasons for that. So this was an interesting article going into the Sathar culture quite a bit, actually. Next up, we have conspiracy theories. Philip Campanaro wrote this, and I really he's very thorough, and I like how this guy thinks. And so I really enjoyed his writing. And so you get this one whole article, and he gives these conspiracy theories about how it goes into each megacorp, and then separate conspiracy theories of how the Sathar are actually using that megacorp and how they could be involved with that megacorp. And so you have each megacorp is detailed here, and they each usually have about 3 conspiracy theories attached to them in this article. So this is adventure seeds. These are adventure hooks. These are ideas to get your juices going as a game master. It's a great article. And it's followed up by Philip Campanaro, article called Sathar and the Megacorps. And this is talking about, instead of the Sathar being involved with or behind or some conspiracy involving the Megacorp and the Sathar, this is how the various Megacorps actually are a force for good to fight the Sathar. So he approached this with 2 articles from 2 different angles. And I love that kind of thoroughness in a writer. And then this article is by Lane K. Saltern. It's called The Thin Sharp Line. This is material I found on the lost internet through the Wayback Machine, through the Internet Archive. And I just thought this is really good material. It's 1 page. We should reprint this and make this accessible to people. And that's what we did. But I was then inspired, and I wrote this article called Extending the Line. And so I took his ideas and I said, let's expand upon that. I think we can expand upon that. So I go into motivations of this Sathar defector, the liabilities, secrets, assets, gambits, and I really expanded on this. I talk about the anatomy of a defection, the anatomy of first contact, go into some new equipment, and discuss the campaign. But basically, this is Star Frontiers meets the TV show Blacklist. And if you know anything about the TV show Blacklist, Red Reddington is this criminal mastermind, and he's working with the FBI. That's what this whole Extending the Line campaign idea is. It's about a campaign that's kind of inspired by Blacklist, and you have this one Sathar defector who is now working with Starlaw and the UPF and helping them unravel Sathar plots in the frontier. It's a very cool idea. And I had I don't think I wrote it in the article, but I had an idea as I was reviewing this. The code name for this Sathar defector needs to be Red, as in Red Reddington. So it's a little nod to Blacklist. And then next up, we get Sathar Military Organization by Tom Stevens. Very cool article. We were having some discussions about how the Sathar will show up and then land a military force to invade a planet. And so we were talking about, are they showing up with freighters? Are they showing up, if they're showing up with freighters, should we have stats for those freighters? Should we detail those? Should we not maybe have a deck plan? And part of the thing that came out of it is that Sathar destroyers, which are the workhorse of their fleet, are very heavy with ground forces, and that they land these ground. So you have these fleets show up, They're heavy laden with ground forces, and he goes into the kind of numbers that each Sathar destroyer and various other ships would be carrying, and so it begins to give you numbers to build an invasion force, the size and potency of that invasion force. So this was an article I really liked, particularly if you're working on a some sort of a Sathar war type of campaign. Then we get Sathar Monsters Without Number. This is written by me. It's all the way back in 2013. 2013, I'd been exposed to Stars Without Number, the RPG, which is basically basic expert D&D converted to a sci-fi setting. And basic expert D&D, the Stars Without Number, is a really elegant RPG system. I like it a lot, and so I was very enamored with Stars Without Number, and I was looking at ways for using it as a more modern D20 type of system for playing Star Frontiers. And so I was writing some of these conversion articles. I think I wrote Characters Without Number, Sathar Monsters Without Number, in an effort to convert the Star Frontier setting to be used in Stars Without Number. Now, there are other conversions out there. I believe I've seen a conversion for 4th edition D&D, for Star Frontiers converted to 4th edition D&D, and there are others for D20. So why you would be interested in this article, even if you don't play Stars Without Number, is all of these creatures are now created to a D20. They've been converted to a D20 stat block. And so that's going to be handy. It doesn't matter what version of D&D you're playing, you now have some stat blocks to work with or to build from or to modify for your game. And so all the greats are here, the Slitherer, the Quick Death, the Cybo Dragon, Cybo Slug, the Slave Bot. The one unusual one here is the Frogs, Froggs. Now, these are from Sundown on Star Mist, where at the back of the book in the appendix, there are 10 harmless frontier creatures which have been taken by the Sathar, and they're being experimented at the secret lab on Star Mist. And they've been now made into a harmful organism. They still look like the harmless regular frontier organism, so you'd see it and go, but then surprise, it's like a trick and a trap for Star Frontiers. And so I did stats for the Frogs because I liked them, and I was actually using them on Clarion in a backwater swamp. One of the Sathar plots was to transplant them there as an invasive species. And so I wrote a little adventure involving that. And so that's not one of the classics, but the rest are all classics. Next up, we get Exploring Hypnotism. Sathar-themed. What are Sathar famous for? Spoiler alert. Hypnotism's their special ability. So I was doing this whole deep dive into hypnotism. And so we cover hypnotism by player characters because it's a sub-skill of the psychosocial skill. Hypnotism by the Sathar. Got some creepy looking art here. This guy named Hicks. He's named after Hicks in Alien because Hicks in Alien is a little annoying. And, so for some reason I just named him Hicks. And you've got this Sathar's doing the Vulcan mind meld on the side of his head and, look into my eyes because they got two pupils. And then there was some great, I guess this artwork down here was done by Eric Windsor. It's very psychedelic. It's kind of really psychedelic. So it's great artwork for this article. And then next up, we have the Cybernuck of New Pale. This is, again, one of those, the ecology of articles by Eric Windsor. Does this deep dives, a little bit of fiction on this creature. And this is a creature for New Pale. And so Eric did a bang up job with this. Can of Worms. Can of Worms. Tom Stevens was always good for writing up a Nighthawks scenario, and this is Can of Worms. You've got a it's a trial run of a new ship design, and oops, the Sathar happened to show up. So it's just a one-off. Just one-off Nighthawk scenario. You have a hefty order of battle for both sides, and you can check that out. Living Expenses. This was written by Indy, and again, I don't know who Indy's real name is. It's more content that I rescued and saved from the lost internet via the Wayback Machine, and this is a modification of the living expenses rule in Alphadon. The living expensive rule is, I believe it tells us here, page 52. On page 52, it tells us that when the player characters get paid, take half. Take half for expenses, taxes, fees, rent. So, and you can then ignore all of those other expenses, because who wants to play bean counting? And so it's it can be rough sometimes to just chop half the here's half your paycheck. People might not like it, but this was an alternate living expenses rule for and it's got different levels of living expenses, from subsistence to poor to struggling to lower middle class, middle class, upper middle class, lower upper class, and so on. And some editors' comments and some artwork of Dralocytes at various levels of economic mobility. The next up is the Got Technobabble thread. I found a Technobabble generator on the web, and I just did a bunch of rollings from it and created a D100 table of Technobabble for Star Frontiers, because sometimes you just need something, something to be going wrong. And so it's number 13. The ambient quantum stream is jinking up, the inverted Tetryon effect, the quantum dampening controller. If you just need something to be the MacGuffin, you just need some Technobabble for the game. Here's a D100 table of Technobabble. And like number 70, the atmospheric Tetryon conduit. Who knows what that is, but it sounds good. And then Gray Wave. This is by Edwin Cintron. This is another one of those. It's the sequel to Love and Atomic Rockets, which is a piece of fiction we had earlier in the Frontier Explorer. And so this is a sequel to that with the same character. And I really love this one. I really loved the plot that was going on in this story. And so good story. Recommend you read it. And then finally, we get another showing of Grimm's Guide from AZ Gamer / Scott Mulder. And this is Grimm's Guide to Intergalactic Conquest, lesson number 6, loose ends. There's some loose ends coming to haunt Grimm in the comic from this point on. So that is Frontier Explorer number 6 from fall 2013, our first Sathar-themed issue. And I thought it was a good one. I enjoyed working on it, and I enjoyed a lot of the content, whether I wrote it or not. And I thought it was pretty good art, a pretty good magazine. So this is Tom for Star Frontiers Gamer with Fanzine Friday number 31. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks to my subscribers. You guys are great. And if you have not subscribed yet, please hit the like, subscribe, and bell icon. Help me build the channel. And I will see you in the Frontier.